I'm not going to lie. I look at things through orange colored glasses, meaning that as a diehard Tennessee fan, I look at what could benefit Tennessee the most. But unless you're a powerhouse like Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Georgia, who is only going to get better, I would say possibly LSU with Brian Kelly. Not a fan of the guy, but he wins everywhere he goes, love him or hate him. And maybe Texas A&M with Jimbo, who just got the number one recruiting class of all time. Unless you're one of those select few, you have no chance of winning a championship in the next 10 years if the system continues to operate as it does. In college football, you have 130 teams. Out of that 130, only 4 get to play in the playoffs. In the NCAA basketball tournament, 68 get to play. That's why out of the blue, you have teams like Memphis that make the championship game. You have teams like Oral Roberts that make a deep run. In college football, you don't have that. It's always Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, or Georgia. In the entire college football playoff history, only 13 teams have made the playoff. Out of that 13, 7 have only made it once. Michigan, Cincinnati, Washington, Michigan State, Florida State, Oregon, and LSU. Alabama's made it 7 times. Clemson has made it 6 times. Ohio State has made it 4 times. Oklahoma has made it 4 times. Georgia has made it twice. And Notre Dame has made it twice. I'm sorry to tell you, Sooner fans, when you join the SEC, it is an entire different animal. You have to play LSU. You have to play Texas A&M. You have to play Alabama. You have to play Georgia. Even the bottom feeders, excluding Vanderbilt, are not as bad as they used to be. I remember when Kentucky football was a complete joke. Since Stoops has gotten there, they have won 10 games twice, and they are the bottom feeders of the league. I'm sorry to tell you, Oklahoma fans, when you join the SEC, you're not making the playoffs if the current system stays the same. In the NFL, 14 teams make the playoffs every year. There have been plenty of years where teams like the New York Giants with Eli Manning, the Colts in 2006 with Peyton Manning, the Baltimore Ravens in Ray Lewis's last year, they just pop up out of nowhere. They get hot at the end of the season and they win it all. That doesn't happen in college football. You don't have random teams that win. Every year it's Alabama, Clemson, just about, or Ohio State. Occasionally you'll get a Georgia, a Notre Dame in there. I have compiled 4 reasons why I think that the college football playoffs should be expanded. Number 1 is players opting out. Let me preface, I have no issue at all with a player setting out of a game. I completely understand from an economic standpoint why Alontae Taylor did not want to risk getting injured. You can get injured in a matter of seconds, and depending on what part of your body is injured, look at Matt Corral. It can cost you millions of dollars. ESPN pays $470 million for the playoff. That's why when you're watching a random bowl game like the Music City Bowl, like the Birmingham Bowl, you constantly see the college football playoff commercial. ESPN needs people to watch it. They need their advertisers to get paid, to get eyes on their products and services. You always hear this is when it matters. And subconsciously, when people from Ohio State see that, when Kenny Pickett sees that, when players from the Sugar Bowl see that, they set out. And then you get games like Kansas State versus LSU, where all the top talent sets out, because why would you risk getting yourself injured when it could cost you millions of dollars? We saw that in the Tennessee game. David Bell, one of the best receivers in the entire league, he set out. The best pass rusher for Purdue set out. You had 3 or 4 players from Ohio State set out of a Rose Bowl game. You had multiple players from Oregon set out from a top bowl game. If you were to have 12 playoff teams, then Ohio State would have been at full strength. Oregon would have been at full strength. You would have gotten to see the top competitors compete. It would benefit the players by letting them compete for a championship, and it would benefit the fans who would get to see the best players play. Think about it. I don't like LeBron James at all. But if I bought tickets to see the Lakers play, I want to see LeBron James play, right? Imagine paying good money and not getting to see LeBron James, or not getting to see Tom Brady for the Buccaneers. You want to see the top talent compete. And unless you expand the playoffs, players are going to continue to set out like Alontae Taylor did. The second reason, recruiting. If you are a top 4 or 5-star prospect, your goal is to get into the NFL and to win a national championship. If you know that, there's no reasonable path to you making the college football playoffs on an Auburn, South Carolina, Penn State, Tennessee, Oklahoma. Why would you go there when you can go to Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, or Georgia? And what that does is it creates an imbalance, a talent imbalance, where Georgia and Alabama have 5 stars all up across their roster, while the lower teams like South Carolina and Tennessee have less talent. There is no reason why a player who's a 5-star athlete would choose Tennessee over Alabama. That's because they can't compete for a championship. But if you expand the playoff, and a team that wins 9 or 10 games in the SEC that might lose 2 or 3 games, think about it, Ole Miss would have been in the playoffs this year if you expanded it to 12 teams. Players are more likely to commit, which then evens up the playing field. And you don't have these blowout games anymore. The league becomes more balanced. And teams like Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan State, Tennessee have a better shot. And those teams are way better than Tennessee. They have a better chance, don't get me wrong. But the point I'm making is they have a better chance through recruiting to play the game. So ESPN pays $470 million for the playoff. Each team gets $6 million, and their conferences get $12.6 million. I'm sorry, they get $6 million. So the total payout is $6 million for Georgia, for Alabama, and $6 million for each team for the conference, just for qualifying. So Cincinnati got their conference $6 million. Georgia and Alabama got their conference $12.6 million just for qualifying. And then each team gets $2.63 million to cover game expenses. Then you have the advertising. Every commercial break, it's AT&T, Disney, that stupid Liberty Mutual Insurance commercials, and Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper pays $489 million. Disney pays $3.2. AT&T pays $4.8. Liberty Mutual spent $435 million because they want eyeballs on their products. Well, think about this. If you have more teams in the playoff, if you have a first round of Ole Miss and Notre Dame, more people are going to watch that. It means that more conferences get higher payouts. You create a new revenue stream, and more advertisers get views on their products, and the network gets more money for its product. And that's the entire goal at the end of the day. It's money. It's for profit, like it or not. I call it like I see it. Indianapolis made $150 million in revenue just for that one game. If you include restaurants, you include gas stations, you include hotels, you include bars, you include the stadium, you include the parking, the programs, the hats, the hot dogs, all of it, 150 million. Now imagine if you would reward a team with a home playoff game. Like, think about it. Alabama would have a home playoff game that would be sold out. You would have more economic activity in Birmingham or in Tuscaloosa, wherever they decide to play. You would have more money for the hotels, more money for the universities, and more money for the conferences, which would create a bigger pie. And a bigger slice of the pie would go to the smaller teams. The Music City Bowl generated more than 290 million for Nashville. That's because Tennessee, the campus was about 3 hours from Nashville. Imagine if Tennessee ever gets their head out of their ass. I like what Josh Heupel's doing, but let's be real, they're not making the playoff anytime soon, even if you expand it to 16 teams. But say they did. Imagine the amount of money that Knoxville would make. The hotels, the bars, the everywhere around would make a lot of money. The fourth reason is it makes the sport more exciting. Think about it. When you have one team that completely dominates, it's like a Hallmark movie. Why would you watch the beginning and the middle if you already know the end? One of the cool things about professional sports and other sports is you don't expect teams to win. Think about it, Baylor. Who picked Baylor to win the championship last year? They came out of the blue. I mean, yeah, they were a good team all year long. They had a lot of veteran players. But who would expect Baylor to beat Gonzaga? UCLA was in a play-in game. Who would have expected UCLA to make the Final Four? Every year you have a random team like George Mason who makes the Final Four. You don't have that in the college football playoff. In the NBA, I'm not a huge fan, but think about it. You had the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs. The Milwaukee Bucks have not won a championship since 1971, before Kareem Abdul-Jabbar changed his damn name. Think about that. But based upon the way the system's set up, Saban's going to continue his run for another 5 to 10 years. Kirby Smart is probably going to win another one. Brian Kelly at LSU, I could see winning one. Jimbo Fisher could maybe pull one off. Ohio State and Clemson. Maybe one year you'll have an outlier like a Penn State that happens to upset Ohio State. You might have a Texas A&M out of the SEC, but overall it's going to continue to be Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and then some fourth team which doesn't belong. That's why I think expanding the playoffs would benefit the fans because more players would play and not set out. It would benefit the schools, they would get more money. It would benefit the conferences who would get more money. It would benefit the hotels and bars and gas companies. It would fuel the economy, physically and literally speaking. It would help even it out. Think about it. If you know, okay, I'm a 5-star running back. I can go to Alabama, sit on the bench for 2 years, and then I can play. Or I can go to South Carolina, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame. I can play right away and I can make the playoffs. You're more likely to go to a school that's going to make the playoffs. That's why I am for expanding the playoffs. And if you're not, and you're not an Alabama, a Georgia, a Clemson, or Ohio State fan, why? Tell me why. Because your team has no chance in hell of winning unless they're one of those top schools.